Hello and welcome back, guys, gals, and non-binary pals, to another reading of Quirk, Class Thaumiel. This will be Chapter 5, Interrogation? More like gaslighting. Here's the summary. The police interrogate the boys, following the Crooked Man incident. Bakugo Katsuki wasn't okay. Everyone and their uncles seemed to be asking Izuku and him, "Are you okay?" after they discovered a dead body in the planetarium. The police, EMTs, and heroes on the scene all asked him, and he gave them the same answer every time. No. When his parents and Auntie Inko showed up in a hurry, a serious-looking detective led them to a break room in the museum, as she told the parents she had questions for the boys, where they sat wrapped up in shock blankets. "First, I just want you to all understand that if this conversation gets too hard for you, we'll stop immediately. You both clearly just went through something terrible. Knowing that, are you feeling up to answering a few questions for me?" "Yup," Izuku said joyously, provoking a strange look from the detective. "Poor boy, probably still in shock," Katsuki's dad whispered to himself. Katsuki piped up. "I don't need to answer your stupid questions. Just arrest him already. He's a villain." The angry boy pointed a shaking hand towards the boy sitting across from him, as far as possible from him in the room they were in. "Well now, young man, that's a serious accusation to make against your friend. Why do you say that he's a villain?" the detective probed. "Yeah, brat," Mitsuki Bakugo, Katsuki's mother, reprimanded. "How dare you call poor Izuku that? Can't you see how much he's been through?" Izuku only quirked his head to the side in response, confused. "His creepy quirk killed that dude. I saw it with my own 2 eyes. Bakugo responded angrily. "I did that?" Izuku asked, pointing a finger at himself and looking to all the world like a lost puppy. "But I was sleeping." "Yes, Bakugo. Young Midoriya here inhaled some of the person's sleeping mist quirk. Hallucinations were a possible side effect. Is it possible that you imagined it? After all, your friend has an imaginary friend quirk, and those kind of quirks don't work without focus. It would have been impossible for him to do anything while he was asleep," the detective countered. Katsuki was stunned. "Is this lady... what was it called again? Oil lamping? Oil lighting? Whatever. She's trying to trick me. Well, flick that." As Katsuki opened his mouth to deliver a response so logical, so utterly convincing, that the detective would have no way to say that he was wrong, Inko said something. "All right, detective, I think that'll be all. Really, interrogating a couple of children? I think we've done quite enough for today. Let's go, Mitsuki." Inko scooped up her son, blanket and all, and carried him out the door. Mitsuki followed while ushering Katsuki. He dropped his blanket, though, because blankets are for babies, duh. The rest of the day passed in a blur, and soon Katsuki was lying on his bed, staring at the open door. The lights were all kept on. "It'll be okay, honey. He's still young. I'm sure his memory will fade as time goes on." "Yeah, I sure hope so," Mitsuki said back to her husband. After a while, she kept talking. "Do you really think that sweet little Izuku could have had anything to do with it?" His silence spoke volumes. Katsuki closed his eyes and wished for morning to come early. Downtown, in another apartment with a boarded-up window, lay a boy who dreamed sweet dreams. As he lay, his uncle watched from the corner, ever vigilant. The SCPs in this chapter were just SCP-783 again, the Crooked Man. I'll be continuing right on to Chapter 6. If might makes right, what does wrong make? This is one of my favorite chapters that I've written. I love fight choreography. I like how I choreographed this fight and the battle IQ and all that stuff. I'm just very happy with it. I hope you like it. Here's a summary. All Might meets Night Eye to make a plan. Cue the Avengers theme. All Might was dead. Or at least, that was the idea. But when Yagi Toshinori awoke from a series of intensive surgeries weeks after his fated fight with his nemesis, he could do little but watch the live news play on the hospital room's television. Instead of the rioting or general panic he expected to see from the public as they mourned the loss of their hero, there was only quiet. Baffled, Yagi continued to watch in mounting horror as he realized that the symbol of peace might not be as important as he thought, that he himself might not be as important as he thought. A realization that was broken when the screen suddenly panned to a muscular hero standing atop a fallen villain with two massive bullhorns, flashing a brilliant smile. "I am here," the imposter announced. All Might began to cough up blood in shock. When Sir Night-Eye heard the news of his mentor's return to consciousness, he rushed to the hospital immediately. He had seen the All Might imposter parading around town, and had immediately known it wasn't the real deal. For one, the imposter had one more wrinkle above his left eyebrow than usual. Whoever was behind that abomination was clearly not a true All Might fan. While his first instinct was to catch the false hero, upon further inspection that proved to be a difficult endeavor. For one, it seemed to have just as much strength and invulnerability as the original. The years Night-Eye had spent as All Might's sidekick had shown him just how much power was needed to break through those defenses. The only people with a chance to take out All Wrong alone were either missing organs or 6 feet under. Night-Eye rushed into the hospital corridor, searching frantically for room 305. That proved to be a futile effort, however, as he soon came face to face with the gaunt face of Yagi Toshinori, stumbling down the hall with several nurses fussing over him, trying to convince him to get back into bed. Yagi, why are you out of bed? You're missing 5 organs, which is 4 more than I'd feel comfortable with right now, Night-Eye admonished the sickly man. "The world needs me. I would not be a true hero if I were to abandon the citizens of Japan when they need me most." All Might's words would be comforting if they weren't coming from a man who just lost 15 pounds overnight, and not by exercising either. "Oh my stars and stripes, the people of Japan are doing just fine. You're the one in danger," Night-Eye snapped back. But what about the imposter? The people think I'm still out there, saving the day." Yes. All Wrong. Oh, that's what I've taken to calling your little knockoff. Will be just fine for another day or two. He hasn't shown himself to be a threat to civilians, so for now, we have the time to make a proper plan to deal with him." Night-Eye poked All Might's stomach, provoking a flinch. Night-Eye decided in that moment to avoid eye contact with his hero. The last thing he wanted was to see All Might die some horrible death. Not only would that be traumatizing to see, but it could also potentially ruin any trust he had built up with his mentor over the years. Which means that you need to be in your best form for any plan I come up with to work. All Might deflated, though not literally, leaving only Yagi Toshinori behind. His eyes looked far gaunter and more sunken than ever before. Night-Eye, of all people, would know, and it was clear that time was catching up to him. "You know best, sir. I can always trust you to get me back on the right track." After a bit of thinking, Yagi delivered his ultimatum. "I'll rest for 3 days longer, but no more. I really do feel the need to bring back the symbol of peace. No All Wrong will cut it." Night-Eye huffed at Yagi's stubbornness, but simply looped the taller man's arm over his shoulder. They walked back to Yagi's hospital room, the symbol of peace shifting his weight onto his closest friend in the world. If a stranger were to observe the scene, they wouldn't see a hero and his sidekick, only 2 equals relying on each other for support. "What do we know about All Wrong so far?" Yagi addressed his assembled table of allies. Across the table from him sat 3 figures. Sasaki Mirai, aka Sir Night-Eye, master tactician with the quirk of future vision. David Shield, the world's most prominent and brilliant support item engineer. And lastly, all the way from the United States, was Kathleen Bates, aka Star and Stripe, an absolute powerhouse fighter capable of manipulating reality itself. Sir had decided that putting together a team of Japanese heroes could result in a press leak about All Wrong's identity. If that fact were to be made public, then the terror that All Might had anticipated upon his first waking might soon become a reality. So instead, he had picked the other 2 based on their connections to Yagi. Additionally, neither David nor Kathleen would consider selling out to the media of a country they didn't even live in. It was a foolproof plan, and certainly one that had nothing to do with an internet user named Sir Sasaki1281's fanfiction written about this very situation. David was the one to provide Yagi with an answer to his question. We can assume that this entity is an experiment produced by All for One before his recent death. Strength-wise, my testing indicates that All Wrong has strength equal to, if not greater than, you at peak performance. He also hasn't shown any signs of fatigue, considering that he's been fighting crime 24/7 since his appearance without a single break. As far as intellect goes, he also seems to be on par with you, Yagi. What do you mean on par with me? All he does is say, "I am here," and grins like an idiot. Is nobody else seeing that? Yagi asked the table. I mean, that's all that counts, right? Kathleen asked hesitantly. You guys, I'm not just some muscle brain who only has one line. I can do smart stuffs too. Yagi pouted. Says the guy who asked me to make him an, and I quote, indestructible suit of armor that looks super cool and can use like 20 quirks at once, David rebutted. The heroes and engineer bickered back and forth for a while longer, until the voice of reason finally broke them up. Since nobody else seems to be participating in this little group project, I've come up with a game plan. Ooh, what's the plan? Kathleen asked, leaning across the table to Sasaki. Yes, I'd love to hear your insight, Mirai, David said, wiping Yagi's coughed-up blood from his forehead. Maybe calling All Might Uncle Sam's knockoff Superman poser was going too far. Yes, Sasaki, I would also love to hear your insight, Yagi said, shooting David one last glare. All right then, Sir Night-Eye started. The first thing we're going to need is 2 tons of support item grade nanotubes. Well, this is the spot, All Might said to Star and Stripe. He was puffed up into a muscular form once more, but his physical therapy report showed that he could only hold it for about 4 hours, max, less if he took any serious punches. To prevent any confusion during the fight, he was dressed in a leftover cosplay from Yagi's last trip in disguise to Comic-Con, the costume of a vigilante by the name of Knuckle Duster. Yep, looks good to me, Star called back. They were positioned by a deserted beach a few miles off of Yokohama, which was All Wrong's last public sighting. You got the cameras ready? We're all good on my end, All Might replied. A few dozen yards from Star, he had set up a news anchor's large camera, acquired through Sir's connections. It was all ready to start broadcasting live on several local Yokohama news stations the moment Yagi flipped the on switch. The effects of gravity affecting Kathleen Bates's person will be stored as potential energy, Star and Stripe said, fulfilling the conditions for her quirk, New Order. With a leap, the hero began to rise into the air, up towards the thick layer of clouds that lay over the waterfront. She continued rising until she had become far out of frame for the recording equipment. Then she made her second order. All of the air in a 12 million cubic foot space below me will warp both light and sound waves to make the appearance of Godzilla as it appears in the 2014 film and proceed to behave as such, Kathleen ranted, then took a moment to catch her breath. Jeez, Night-Eye, leave a gal some room to breathe, would ya? The air behind Star began to shimmer, and out of the water rose a massive creature who stood at least 350 feet tall. All Might flipped the switch to record. Here we see a gigantic monster has appeared at a local beach in Yokohama Prefecture, All Might said behind the camera, using his best news anchor impression. All residents are advised to evacuate until a hero strong enough to take on such an impressive villain appears on the scene. The residents had already been evacuated, by Sir Night-Eye the day before the operation, of course. Still, the sight of a gigantic monster, roaring and tearing up the beach waves as it writhed around, would be enough cause for panic for any hero who wasn't aware of that fact. Which is why, 4.5 minutes later, All Wrong showed up just on Sir's schedule. All Might crushed the camera in one hand to end the livestream. You know, maybe David has a point about that muscle brain stuff. I could have just switched it off. Cease your deceptive machinations at once, imposter, for I am the true All Might, he yelled as he pointed heroically at All Wrong. I am here, was All Wrong's only response. The figure clad in red and blue leapt up to the kaiju and attempted to deliver a Delaware smash right into its noggin, only to phase right through it as if the monster was made of air. Phase 1 is complete. Target is in sight, Night-Eye said to All Might and Star through their in-ear monitors. Star, proceed with Phase 2. That's right, bucko. We tricked you, and now it's time for you to disappear so the real All Might can get its job back, Star said from the air as she raised a hand, causing the Godzilla illusion to break, thousands of shards of light dissolving as if a shattered pane of glass. All Might will now cease to move from the space he stands for 10 seconds. Both muscular men on the beach froze, unable to move a single inch. Dang it affects both of them, Star said into her earpiece. I guess the bugger really does consider himself to be All Might. That's fine, Star. It'll make the plan more difficult, though, if you can't use orders that cause direct harm without hurting All Might as well, Night-Eye replied. And such was the condition for New Order. Star needed to know her target's full name that they most identified with before she could impose any orders on them. In addition, she couldn't exceed a certain amount of physical force, not directly anyways. This meant that restraining two beings as strong as All Might could only be done for a few seconds before the order was stripped. I am here, the imposter yelled as he broke free. Taking one step forward, then two, All Might began to run towards the real All Might. Sand sprayed in all directions as the two collided, hands gripping each other as they wrestled. Is that really how I sound? All Might asked his earpiece. Please focus on the villain ahead of you, Night-Eye responded. And yes. Well, lethality isn't my only trick, Star yelled from far in the air. She seemed to be continuously rising, gaining altitude as she gave orders from above. All Might will now lose consciousness. The hero and his doppelganger slumped to the sand in unison. I think that worked. Sir, David, are you ready for the drop? Star asked, tapping her earpiece. Not yet. All Wrong appears to be recovering somehow, David responded. Is it possible that it is immune to mind-based attacks too? Sure enough, the slumped form in spandex twitched and slowly rose to its feet. The entire time, though, his head remained slumped to the side, eyes closed and mouth open to drool, much like his clone still lying in the sand. Aw, dang it all to Hooters, Star cursed. It's almost like this thing's been programmed to fight non-stop. In Musatafa, a certain boy in a certain preschool sneezed. Fine then, consider that order revoked, Star hastily yelled, but it was too late to quell the damage entirely. All Wrong let loose a full-powered punch at his foe lying in the sand. No! Star screamed from in the air. When the dust cleared, All Might was standing, but only barely. All Wrong seemed baffled by this turn of events, if his unchanged grin was anything to go by. All Might spit a mouthful of blood and phlegm into the sand. Worry not, young Bates, for I shall prevail against all foes. Hey, don't call me that. It makes me feel old when I realize my childhood hero is in his 60s, Star said back. At this point, she was much too high in the clouds to hear him, so they had to rely on their comms unit. Hey, Dunderhead Shield, if there was ever a time for the drop, it would be now. We're struggling down here. That's my signal to book it, All Might said as he sped away from the confused clone. If All Wrong was momentarily confused before at the sight of a villain taking on one of his full-powered punches and then getting back up, he must have been absolutely baffled to see a military-grade freight helicopter descending from the cloud cover. Barely visible from the ground, Sir Night-Eye stood in the aircraft's open door, gripping some sort of black metal cable, hand just yards from the end of the wire dangling outside. I feel sorry for the taxpayers who are covering this whole ordeal, he said over the comms, just before he leapt out the door, cable in hand. I've got you, Star said from her position in the air, just under the falling man, and out of the air grabbed not Night-Eye, but the end of the black wire. Kathleen Bates will ignore Newton's third law of motion for 15 seconds. Star fell from the air, gravity nullification abandoned for this new order. As she fell, she picked up speed much faster than she should have, quickly passing by the still falling Night-Eye. The built-up potential energy gained by such a rise into the air now bore down on her as she overcame terminal velocity. A crack sounded in the air as the hero zoomed towards the ground, her free hand outstretched into a fist. That boom was soon followed by an even louder one as she crashed into the beach, sand melting to glass immediately upon impact. Underneath her fist was the torn costume of a mildly bruised All Wrong. Star, who by any right should have been grievously wounded by a fall from that speed, had not a scratch on her. By removing the third law's effect on herself, she could momentarily throw any punch without equivalent consequences. The cable, now buried in the crystalline crater of glass, pulled taut suddenly, and a whirring noise followed as Sir Night-Eye slid down the makeshift zipline. With his limber legs, Night-Eye delivered a strong kick to his fallen foe as he landed on the ground, dealing absolutely no damage to the Juggernaut. "Quick, All Might, grab him while he's stunned!" Back on the scene, All Might grabbed his clone and lifted him, spinning him around in his hands as he did. The clone spun faster and faster, the cable wrapping him ever tighter as the helicopter slowly lowered to the ground. By the time David landed the helicopter and disembarked from the cockpit, All Wrong was completely contained in a donut of cable, 4 yards in radius. While he tried to struggle, the cable didn't give way even a single inch. "No use trying to break out," David said as he approached. "That fiber is a nanomaterial I just spent the last 5 days and billions of yen developing." "Phase 3 is complete. Good work, everyone," Night-Eye said to the gathered group. Not a single hero walked away from the battle with significant injuries, except for All Might, but that was just par for the course. "Now, Star, if you would do the honors." "I'd love to, thanks," she said as she put her hands on Sasuke's shoulders. "Sasuke Mirai's quirk will now function reversed in regard to time." With that, Night-Eye looked All Wrong directly in his soulless eyes, the physical contact of his quirk fulfilled by his earlier kick, and furrowed his brow at what he saw. Then he began to laugh. Starting as a chuckle, then migrating to a full-blown guffawing, Night-Eye laughed at whatever truths he saw in All Wrong's past. "What did you see? Is it all for one? Did he plant this copy as some kind of plan to take over the world after his death?" All Might demanded. "A toy," Night-Eye managed through his teary eyes. "We've been fighting a toy." "I'm clearly missing something, because toys don't take one of my Tokyo Smash attacks and live to tell the tale. You're gonna need to explain," Star said crossly, arms folded. With that, Night-Eye regained some composure and stood up. "All Wrong isn't related to All for One, never has been." He paused as he let that sink into the group. They were so concerned with stopping a single supervillain's schemes, they never once paused to think that this clone may have had some other, unrelated source. It's just the product of some kid's quirk manifestation. It looks like he was crying over All Might's supposed death when his action figure transformed into a real-life All Might. Lucky kid, Sasuke thought to himself. "So what you're saying is this villain is just a quirk accident?" David asked. "I'm saying that All Wrong isn't a villain at all. In fact, he's been faithfully following his wielder's command to be a hero all this time. Just think, when did All Wrong ever cause harm to a civilian?" Night-Eye was answered only with silence. "In fact, this whole situation is preposterous when you think about it. We have a perfect hero patrolling Japan unrestingly, 24/7. We want to, what, stop him? Throw him into Tartarus?" Night-Eye continued. But my job," All Might protested. "My identity!" "All Might, let's be real. You're missing half your organs. Plus, you've been telling me how it was always your dream to get a license and teach at UA." Night-Eye outstretched an arm to the bound figure, his head barely peeking out over the gigantic bundle of wire. "This is your golden opportunity. Let this sentient quirk do the work for you, and you can finally get the chance to retire." I suppose you have a point, Mirai," All Might said, indignation draining out of his expression. "I'm glad you came to your senses," Sasuke said, smugly. "Okay, not that this little heart-to-heart you have going on isn't adorable, but what's the plan for Grinny McMuscleface over there?" Star piped up, pointing over her shoulder to the exposed head of All Wrong. Cables disconnected from the helicopter as David lifted the aircraft into the air. "I'm blowing this popsicle stand. See you all at the Hero Gala," he had said once the heroes began discussing the logistics of unleashing a ball of unbridled kinetic energy from its containment. "Okay, big guy. I'm really sorry for punching you and all, but I'm gonna need you to be really calm and not kill us all when I take these cables off, okay? Star and Stripe asked the bound figure.
I am here.
Oh, phew, she said, wiping sweat from her brow. Well, since you promised...
Carbon nanotubes within 100 feet of me will dissolve. Wait, Star, let's discuss this first,
All Might called, unheard by Star.
Into their atomic components,
Star finished. The cords binding Allwrong began to dissolve, leaving only a tar-like substance covering his body. Now freed, he sent a glare in All Might's direction, who raised his hands into a fighting stance. Then, turning to Star, all colors seemed to drain from the copy's face.
I am here,
Allwrong called, and promptly ran away at full speed, never once looking back. From that day forward, All Might was dead, and a new #1 hero had risen. The SCP in this chapter was SCP-137, the toy shapeshifter now known as Allwrong. And that's all for the chapter. Oh man, I loved it. I hope you like it as much as I do. I love the dynamic that I managed to capture between David Shield, Melissa, Night Eye, and All Might, like as this group of 4. They're all so chaotic. They're like, I try to write it in such a way where it's like where everyone except for Night Eye are actually not helping in the group project, right? Like there's some sort of group project in school, and like he's the only one who's putting effort into this, into making a plan. Everyone else is just completely distracted the whole time. And that's an experience I've had, and I feel for Night Eye. But at the same time, I don't really believe that... I think this is his fanfiction. He was just bringing his fanfiction to life. He wanted to see what he viewed to be the 4 greatest heroes. He wanted to assemble the Avengers. That's the entire reason why he picked this lineup. Just to assemble the Avengers and fulfill his fantasies. So, anyways, that was my little rant for today. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. Again, thank you so much for listening. Patch out.